There comes a time in every relationship where you realize the essence of it and where it's going, whether it's well or not. But then there is a second time in every relationship where the world sees what you were feeling. So there's also a moment in geopolitics when the world finds what you've been warning them about all along, a moment when assumptions crack and narratives collapse, and truth becomes too obvious to ignore. It always arrives later than you hope, but sooner than you're ready. This week, that moment came with a stress test, a simple evaluation of Chinese-made AI models, and suddenly the world could see the thing that Taiwan has been living with for years. These engines weren't just biased or sloppy, they weren't just politically skewed, they were built to serve one purpose, and that is to deny Taiwan's existence, manipulate information, and generate cyberattack commands on demand. In other words, a confirmation that China's AI is not merely an imperfect product, but an extension of state power. In short, it's not a bug, it's a feature. But for Taiwan, none of this is new. Long before Europe issued rare espionage alerts, long before LinkedIn became a battlefield, long before intelligence agencies started naming names, Taiwan had already felt the quiet pressure of infiltration, from the 1,000 grains model, we'll explain that later, to underground networks, to psychological shaping campaigns that operate 1 grain at a time. And if that's not obvious, then how about all the Chinese warships and aircrafts that constantly fly over or travel into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, the ADIZ incursions, that happens nearly weekly. Now, it's whether this awakening is happening fast enough, and whether our partners understand that in this era, economic leverage is strategic warfare. Allies don't just cooperate, they have to align. They choose each other politically, technologically, and most importantly, economically. And every investment, every supply chain decision, every diplomatic signal is a move on a very real board. Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socioeconomic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation. Let's start with our first story, which we sort of covered in the introduction. Taiwan's National Security Bureau ran tests on 5 Chinese AI models: DeepSeek, Doubao, Baidu's Ernie, Alibaba's Gwen, and Tencent's Yuanbao. All 5 push the same political line. Taiwan is part of China. They also avoid words like democracy, freedom, and human rights, which suggests built-in censorship. The test didn't stop there. Investigators found these models could generate inflammatory political messages and even help produce basic cyberattack commands. That includes sample exploited codes and step-by-step instructions for breaking into networks. Analysts say this lines up with China's own AI regulations, which require companies to follow, quote, core socialist values and block anything the government considers harmful. Taiwan security officials say the findings confirm a growing risk. Chinese-made AI isn't just biased, it's built to serve Beijing's political system, and it can be used as a tool for influence operations and cyber attacks. So that's the painful truth, and none of this shocks Taiwan. Really, none of it shocks the world, but we've just found out more layers to it. We've seen versions of this for years. The only difference now is the speed and scale that it's happening. These models aren't drifting into propaganda, they're actually programmed for it. China's rules tell companies exactly what the models can say and what it must avoid. So when the AI insists Taiwan isn't a country, or won't touch the word freedom, that's not a bug. It's the assignment. And once you mix that political filter with code generating, that's where things get serious. AI already makes phishing emails and sharper malware easier to write. That used to take attackers a day. Now it takes minutes. So for Taiwan, this isn't a new threat. It's the same playbook, just automated. Faster, cheaper, and able to reach far more people at once. The world is finally catching up to what we've seen living for a long time. Our second story considers the same thing, but from another perspective. The UK's domestic intelligence agency, MI5, issued a rare public warning this past week about Chinese espionage. The alert said Chinese intelligence officers have been posing as recruiters, consultants, and shell companies on LinkedIn to target British lawmakers and policy staff. Donghai University researcher Pu Chaoheng says the same tactics were already showing up in Taiwan. He points to a recent case involving a Hong Kong man who allegedly recruited active duty and retired Taiwanese military personnel. Prosecutors say he entered Taiwan multiple times under business and tourism visas, offering cash for sensitive information and even non-resistance commitment for wartime scenarios. Hong linked these activities to the, quote, thousand grains theory. This is a strategy where China deploys many low-profile actors who each gather small bits of intelligence and make small bits of influences. When combined, these pieces paint a full picture. He argues that Taiwan needs stronger financial checks, better platform security, and tighter cross-agency monitoring. What MI5 describes in the UK is basically the same thing Taiwan has dealt with for decades, just with different accents and different platforms. The thousand grains model isn't about dramatic spy stories, it's about volume. It's about hundreds of small contacts, tiny offers, casual meetings, and friendly introductions that slowly build into real intelligence networks. And the part that hits home is this. China doesn't need one brilliant spy to crack a system. It just needs enough grains to fill the jar. Taiwan has seen that pattern in the military, in local politics, and business associations, in student groups, everywhere. So when the UK rings the alarm, it's not a new problem. It's a shared problem finally being named out loud. And that matters because espionage today isn't just about secrets. It's about shaping perception, eroding trust, and softening a society long before any crisis. Taiwan knows that better than anyone. However, Taiwan has also chosen its allies. Political tensions between China and Japan spilled into the entertainment world this week. The trigger was Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae's comments in the Diet, where she said a Chinese attack on Taiwan could create a, quote, survival-threatening situation for Japan. Under Japan's security laws, that could allow collective self-defense. Beijing quickly reacted. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Culture and Tourism, and Ministry of Education all issued warnings, urging citizens to avoid traveling to Japan and to reconsider study plans in Japan. Soon after, cinema operators in Beijing announced they would pull Japanese movies nationwide, including major releases like Demon Slayer: Infinity Castle. The move comes during a sluggish year for China's box office. Holiday revenue dropped to 1.8 billion yuan, down from 2.1 billion last year. Industry watchers say foreign films were expected to boost numbers, but rising political pressure is now pushing those titles off the schedule.
It's not every day you get to see what the president is eating for lunch, but on this occasion, Taiwan's leader is showing everyone that he's enjoying Japanese scallops. His meal is a message that his government stands with Tokyo. Lai Ching-te is joining several Taiwanese officials in voicing support for Japan in the middle of a diplomatic spat with China. It started after Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae said that a Chinese attack on Taiwan would be grounds for mobilizing the country's self-defense forces.
If China uses battleships and force is used, that poses an existential risk to Japan, no matter how you think about it.
China has not taken Takaichi's comments lightly. It has urged its citizens to boycott travel to Japan and has also cut off imports of Japanese seafood. And as Beijing tightens the screws on Tokyo, ruling party officials in Taiwan are urging the public to help Japan out.
借此机会呼吁台湾的同胞，我们这个时候能够到日本去旅游。
Taipei and Tokyo have a history of coming to each other's aid when Beijing applies pressure. In 2021, China banned imports of Taiwanese pineapples, cutting fruit farmers here off from their biggest market. But Japan stepped in, buying up Taiwanese pineapples, with late Japanese Prime Minister Abe Shinzo leading the charge. And when China banned all Japanese seafood imports in 2023 after Tokyo began releasing treated wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear power plant, Taipei continued to buy seafood from that area. But this time, it's not just Taiwan that has Japan's back. On Thursday, the U.S. State Department's deputy spokesperson posted on X, saying his country's commitment to the U.S.-Japan alliance and to Japanese defense is unwavering. He added that the U.S. firmly opposes any unilateral attempts to change the status quo, including through force or coercion. And as tensions simmer, concerns over whether the two countries can find an off-ramp are growing. But at least one analyst warns that things could get worse.
China is just starting in terms of the pressure that it's going to put on Japan. And the question is, how will other countries respond to, for example, Chinese tourists not coming to Japan?
With no end to the diplomatic dispute in sight, it's now a matter of whether Japan's backers can carry it through the storm.
Now, a group of Democratic Progressive Party, DPP lawmakers from here in Taiwan, down in Kaohsiung, the city down south, held a press event this week urging Taiwanese citizens to travel to Japan as a show of support. They said Taiwan should stand with Japan as it faces political and economic pressure from Beijing. These legislators are saying that the recent 10,000 universal cash payouts from the Taiwanese government could pay for a trip more affordable and encourage airlines to offer discount vouchers to Japan. They also pointed out that former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe once publicly backed Taiwan's pineapples when China tried to block imports. He said if Japan is in trouble, Taiwan is in trouble. And this is urging citizens to strengthen people-to-people ties. This story lands differently when you see it in the bigger picture. China put pressure on Japan, Japan spoke up for Taiwan, and now Taiwan is choosing to show up for Japan. Not with statements, but with something more concrete. Everyday life stuff, travels, soft powers in the form of plane tickets, and supporting industries from Japan. And there is something very human about it. People-to-people ties often move faster than official diplomacy. When Taiwan sends tourists, it sends confidence, spending, and a signal that the relationship isn't just strategic, it's social, it's lived. Now, as Taiwan shows up for one of its major allies, another one shows up for Taiwan. The U.S. has made its dependence on Taiwan unusually explicit this week. Speaking at the U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum, President Donald Trump said America's semiconductor comeback, quote, cannot succeed unless foreign companies, especially Taiwan's, are allowed to bring in their own engineers to start up new fabs. He pointed directly to TSMC's massive Arizona project, part of a $165 billion expansion, and argued that American workers need hands-on training from Taiwanese specialists before the industry can stand on its own. Trump also referenced Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang, saying that the projects involving his friends from Taiwan won't work without experienced team who know chip manufacturing down to the micron. As Washington acknowledges Taiwan's central role on rebuilding these chip bases, two major tech companies also invested in Taiwan to push the relationship in this direction. Back towards the island, Google officially opened its new Shilin office, now the company's largest AI infrastructure R&D center outside the United States. President Lai Ching-te said the site will train core AI talent, deepen Taiwan's cooperation with global tech firms, and strengthen the island's position in next-generation computing. At the same time, US-based GMI Cloud announced a $500 million Nvidia-supported AI data center in Taiwan's Taoyuan city. The facility will house roughly 700 GPUs run on Nvidia's latest Blackwell GB3000 class processors and deliver up to 2 million tokens per second once it becomes operational in 2026. Early consumers include Nvidia, Trend Micro, and Wistron. And the company expects the site to generate around $1 billion in total contract value. So taken together, these moves show how deeply Taiwan is becoming embedded in the global AI and semiconductor economy, not just as a supplier, but as a strategic partner at every level. What these stories show is a feedback loop, one that keeps pulling Taiwan closer to the center of the global tech map. The US needs Taiwan's engineers to rebuild its fabs. Google needs Taiwan's ecosystem to build its next generation of AI tools. And Nvidia needs Taiwan's data centers to expand its global compute network. This isn't just normal foreign investments. It's strategic positioning, and it's happening because Taiwan offers something no other place can match. Top-tier semiconductor know-how, reliable supply chains, more importantly, non-red supply chains, strong IP protection, and engineering talent that scale. In the AI era, that combination is gold. And here's the bigger point. Once companies place their critical infrastructure in Taiwan, fabs, R&D centers, data centers, they also place part of their national and corporate future there. Which is a good thing, because so far we've heard so much about Taiwan investing overseas, and we like to see some of that reciprocated. That creates alignment, that creates leverage, and it changes the strategic picture in a way that no statement or treaty can. And this is how alliances harden, through shared dependence, not just shared value. Now, finally, with all of this investment coming into Taiwan, there is a real problem that Taiwan needs to solve. A new report from the Washington-based Foundation for Defense Democracies, FDD, is urging Taiwan to take stronger steps to protect its energy lifelines from Chinese pressure. The report is based on a summer tabletop exercise held in Taipei with Taipower and other agencies, looking at how China could escalate from political coercion and economic influences to disrupting Taiwan's energy imports. The study recommends that Taiwan's diversified LNG sources invested in its own LNG carriers and expand energy storage. It also calls on Taiwan to revisit nuclear options, including small modular reactors, the SMRs, as part of a long-term resilience strategy. And from the United States, the report suggests something even more direct, planning for the potential reflagging of Taiwan-bound commercial ships under the U.S. flags and conducting convoys and escort drills with the U.S. Navy. Analysts say these steps could signal that the U.S. is prepared to counter any attempt by China to impose a shadow blockade. Now, this report hits the heart of Taiwan's biggest strategic blind spot: energy.
Is Taiwan energy resilient? A forum in Taipei welcomed German energy policy experts and U.S. defense experts to discuss weaknesses in the national grid as it faces threats from China.
Of course, nuclear energy is more independent than fossil fuels, for exactly the reason you mentioned. In the long run, however, you still depend on the suppliers for the nuclear material. So you gain some independence because you don't need regular supplies, but the best solution would still be betting on renewable energies.
The panel said a complete phase-out of fossil fuel is needed for Taiwan to survive longer if a Chinese blockade cuts off its energy supply. But expert added that it's up to Taiwan's people to decide if it should bring back nuclear power or invest in renewable energy. Besides choosing energy sources that would better secure its power supply, the country also needs to be ready to accept help from other nations.
I fully expect these countries, probably led by the United States, to organize escort convoys to break the blockade and force China to decide, do you want war or do you allow this convoy to go through? When they offload the ships, offload the LNG and oil, and if it isn't a plan to organize it, to receive it, to distribute it, then it's not helping the people of Taiwan.
Taiwan shut down its last nuclear power plant in May and voted to stay nuclear-free after a referendum in August.
There you go. This report hits the heart of Taiwan's biggest strategic blind spot: energy. You can build fabs, attract Google and Nvidia, expand your AI footprint, but none of it matters if the power goes out, if ships can't arrive at your ports. And if China knows that, that's why energy has quietly become one of the most vulnerable front lines in Taiwan's security picture. And the nuclear conversation, well, it's back on the table for a reason. AI data centers and advanced manufacturing all demand enormous amount of stable power. If Taiwan wants to stay a global tech hub, it needs an energy strategy built for that scale. That's survival planning, long term, not just crisis to crisis. And that does it for our coverage of last week's news. Hopefully we gave you some perspective to make sense of them. Come back again for Beyond the Reefs next week as we continue to explore the socioeconomic impacts that's influencing Taiwan and around the world. I'm Joey Chow, and this is Radio Taiwan International.